The vast arena of the Galactic Union was filled with a cacophony of voices, alien and otherworldly creatures whose very presence seemed to warp the space around them, sat in a circle on elevated thrones made of materials so rare and precious that even the richest worlds could not afford them today. They discussed the fate of lesser civilizations, their voices dripping with disdain and amusement. As they turned their attention toward Earth, the humans who had dared to claim their place among the stars had never been taken seriously by anyone on the Council, their technology laughably primitive compared to the grandeur of the galactic empires that had forged peace and order across the stars. The humans were still wrapped in their ignorance, their cities built from crude metals, while the Council members wielded powers that shaped the very fabric of existence itself. The mockery began almost immediately, as one alien after another shared their thoughts. Some spoke of humanity's primitive weapons, still relying on projectiles like the ancient weapons of war. Others laughed at their clumsy spacecraft that still burned through atmosphere with chemical rockets, unable to break free of their gravity. Well, without the help of far more advanced allies, it was all too easy for them to dismiss the humans as a dying race clinging to old ways that could never survive in the ever-expanding universe, where civilizations like theirs thrived among the stars. An ancient being from a forgotten species known only as the Elder spouted ancient wisdom that had become doctrine for galactic peace, warning the Council that the humans were too unpredictable. Their wild nature was their greatest flaw. They were driven by emotion and ambition, where other races had learned to temper their instincts and act with cold, calculated reason. Humans were still ruled by fear and hope. There was little room in this galaxy for those who acted on such instincts. Another alien, an Athik from the southern quadrant, who had seen thousands of civilizations rise and fall in their pursuit of galactic dominance, snorted in amusement. They were like children playing in a sandbox, thinking they could build castles where only the dust would remain. He waved a hand dismissively. Their technology is an antique, their ships so slow, their weapons so weak. Nothing they have will ever pose a threat to us or any of the other great races. But one voice rose above the others, a soft and almost melodic voice that cut through the chatter of disdain. It was the voice of Zir, the consul from the Xavian race, a species known for their intellect and diplomatic prowess. Zir had watched the humans closely over the years. They had been a strange curiosity, something almost impossible to ignore given how quickly they had adapted to the complexities of space travel. Despite their flaws, they had an unyielding will and a drive that seemed to make them more resilient than any species. Zir's eyes narrowed as they spoke. The humans have a quality that none of us possess. They are relentless. They refuse to stop pushing no matter how many obstacles are thrown before them. They are capable of great feats in a short period of time. Their ingenuity is terrifying when combined with their sheer willpower. It was clear that Zir's words did not fall on receptive ears. The Council members scoffed and exchanged looks of pity, thinking that perhaps Zir had grown sentimental. After all, there was no evidence to suggest humanity would ever amount to anything other than a fleeting curiosity. Zir's warning went unheard, but the Council's concern lingered in the back of their mind. Despite the laughter of the Council, something deep in Zir's intuition told them that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. While the galaxy laughed and ridiculed humanity on the grand stage of interstellar politics, beneath the surface on Earth, the quiet hum of human ingenuity began to grow louder, hidden away in dark corridors of research facilities scattered across the planet. A select few knew what was coming. An effort unlike any other undertaken by mankind was underway. A fleet of secret ships was being constructed in deep space, untraceable and undetectable by any known methods, a new class of vessel designed to break through the walls of space itself without a whisper of detection. The Terran Federation had long understood that humanity's survival in this vast and treacherous universe would not come from alliances with the galactic giants, but from their ability to stand alone, to innovate beyond the limits set by others, and to become a force of nature that could not be ignored. The world's brightest minds worked day and night, often at the cost of their own health and well-being, but they didn't care, because they knew they were working on something monumental, something that would change the course of history forever. Hidden in the depths of Earth's oceans, massive shipyards were busy building ships that defied everything previously thought possible, cloaked in technologies so advanced that even the most sophisticated alien scanners would be unable to detect them. These ships were not just stealthy, they were near invisible. The project was known only to a few high-ranking officials, those who understood the full scope of what humanity had achieved. This was not just a response to the ridicule of the galaxy. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity was not a creature to be underestimated, not anymore. The human fleet was not meant to conquer, not yet at least, but rather to send a message to the galaxy that humanity had arrived, and they would be heard from the outside. Looking in, it seemed like an impossible task. After all, humanity had barely escaped the gravitational pull of its own planet, much less learned how to compete with the likes of the Zerkian or Xevian empires. But that was the brilliance of humanity's strength. They didn't need to conquer with sheer numbers or overwhelming firepower. They just needed to disrupt the established order, to remind the galaxy that a new player had entered the stage, and they were ready for their moment of reckoning. As the final preparations were made on Earth, the Terran Federation's leadership held a secret meeting on a remote moon far from the prying eyes of the galaxy. The Council's decision was final. The time had come to reveal humanity's greatest weapon, a single stealth ship, a prototype so advanced that its power and capabilities would send shockwaves through the entire galactic community. The ship was not yet perfect, but it was close enough to be a game-changer. It was sleek and deadly, its hull designed to bend light and sound around it, making it almost undetectable. The engines were quiet as whispers, capable of reaching the farthest corners of the galaxy without leaving a trace. Humanity had invested everything into this project, knowing that their future would depend on how they presented themselves to the universe. The fleet of ships was still far from completion, but this single ship was the signal, the beginning of humanity's rise to prominence in the galaxy. They would show the Union what humanity was capable of with a single devastating message, and when that moment came, no one would be laughing anymore. The Galactic Union continued its deliberations, the Alien Council immersed in their own self-assuredness. The vast arenas of the Union were filled with species that had dominated the stars for millennia, each of them with empires spanning entire solar systems. These beings had mastered the forces of nature, manipulated energy, and created technologies that humanity could only dream of. To them, Earth was little more than a curiosity, a distant rock filled with primitive creatures who barely understood the concept of space travel. Every empire had its history of dealing with upstart civilizations, of watching lesser species rise only to fall beneath the might of their superiority. The Zerkians, with their command over psychic energies, spoke with an air of finality, convinced that humanity's failure was already written in the stars. The Athik, a race of calculating strategists, believed that Earth's population was doomed to destroy itself before it could ever hope to challenge the galactic balance. And the Xevian Council, with their wisdom and foresight, had long since written off humanity as a fleeting anomaly. They laughed at the idea of humans venturing too far into the stars. Their military was archaic, their ships nothing more than fragile shells, unable to survive the harsh realities of galactic warfare. The Union's fleets, each with ships that could easily vaporize entire planets, viewed humanity's space programs with little more than mild interest. The more they discussed the human race, the more certain they became that the Terrans were nothing to fear. "Let them try to venture into the void," one Athik representative sneered. "They will not last. Their bodies are too frail to survive the harsh realities of space, and their ships will burn before they ever make it past their own moon." His words rang out, dripping with superiority. "We have watched them for centuries," said the Zerkian representative. "They still rely on outdated technology, on machines that cannot even detect our presence in their skies. What could they possibly have that would threaten us?" Yet, even as they spoke, a deep unease began to grow in the back of their minds. Whispers began to circulate in quieter corners of the arena. There were rumors, strange reports, that the humans had somehow broken through their technological limits, that they had developed something far more advanced than anyone expected. But these rumors were quickly dismissed, drowned out by the chorus of laughter that filled the air. After all, Humanity was nothing compared to the millennia of progress the Union had attained. Still, in the back of their minds, a nagging thought began to stir. The humans were unpredictable. Their potential, though raw and unrefined, was undeniable. Perhaps they had not yet reached the limits of their power. But that was a thought for later, a fleeting concern. For now, the Union would continue its deliberations with one simple truth: humanity was not a threat. The Council moved forward, discussing matters of trade, resources, and galactic politics, their focus undeterred by the rumors or warnings. The time to confront this so-called threat was far in the future, they assumed. When humanity finally did make its presence known, the great powers of the galaxy would be more than prepared to crush them. After all, they had done it time and again with other young species. What the Council didn't know, however, was that humanity's plan had already begun. The moment they underestimated the Terran Federation, the moment they laughed at them from their towering thrones, was the moment they had sealed their fate. In the shadows of their dismissive laughter, humanity was preparing to show them just how wrong they were. And when the day arrived, the galaxy would tremble, not with the roar of destruction, but with the silence of a new power rising in the dark. The laughter that filled the Galactic Union arena began to die down as the deliberations continued. The alien species, entrenched in their superiority, settled into an easy rhythm, each passing moment reinforcing their belief that humanity's rise was nothing more than a fleeting fantasy. They spoke of resources, trade routes, and the inevitable rise and fall of lesser species, all the while ignoring the whispers of unrest that had started to hum just beneath the surface of the Council. The Union's greatest minds were too consumed by their own self-assuredness to sense the shift in the atmosphere. It began as a faint disturbance, something so small, so imperceptible, that no one initially took notice, a fluctuation in the electromagnetic fields of the arena, almost like a ripple across the fabric of space itself. But for those attuned to the currents of energy, it was undeniable. Zer, the Exevian consul, paused mid-sentence. His face, usually composed and calm, shifted ever so slightly. His sharp, perceptive eyes darted to the vast viewports surrounding the council chamber. The air felt charged, different somehow, as if the very fabric of space had been disturbed. He wasn't the only one to feel it. A low hum resonated through the chamber, barely perceptible at first, but growing steadily in intensity. It was the kind of vibration that even the most technologically advanced species could not ignore. It wasn't natural, nor was it a fluctuation they could immediately explain. It was something else, something entirely foreign. A ripple, like the flicker of a distant star, passed through the fabric of the space around them. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a mere whisper of energy, but in an instant, the entire arena was aware of it. Then, a voice, a soft, calm voice, cut through the unsettling silence. "Attention, members of the Galactic Union. This is Captain Ellis of the Terran Federation." The voice echoed in the minds of the council members, bypassing any translation systems with the precision of a direct psychic intrusion. It wasn't forceful, but it was sharp, clear, and undeniably present. The aliens in the room stiffened, their eyes narrowing as they recognized the unmistakable sound of human speech. Zer felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His mind immediately went into overdrive, analyzing the source, calculating the meaning of this strange message. The aliens who had so casually dismissed humanity now found themselves gripped by an unfamiliar sensation. It was the feeling of being watched, of being observed by something that was not only aware but actively seeking to engage. They were no longer the ones in control of the narrative. "Please pay attention, Galactic Council," the voice continued. "We come to you not as a joke, not as a curiosity. We come as the future. You will witness the full extent of our capabilities." A ripple of unease passed through the council. This was not how things were supposed to be. The humans were not supposed to have this kind of presence, this kind of awareness. There had been no warning, no signal, no negotiations, just a voice from nowhere, speaking with absolute authority. And then, in the blink of an eye, it happened. The very fabric of space before the council seemed to warp. A shimmering distortion, like the flicker of a star on the edge of perception, filled the viewing windows of the arena. The air grew heavy, charged with energy, as if the very atmosphere was being bent and shaped by an invisible hand. The alien representatives stared, transfixed, as a sleek, unfamiliar shape began to materialize in front of them. At first, it was barely visible, its outline only a faint shadow against the backdrop of distant stars. But as the distortion grew, the vessel became clearer, an impossibly smooth hull, dark and reflective, with lines so sleek that it looked as though it had been carved from the very essence of space itself. The humans had arrived, and their ship, their greatest weapon, had just made itself known to the galaxy. The council chamber fell silent as the shimmering distortion grew clearer, more defined, until the full form of the human ship emerged from the depths of space. Its surface seemed to ripple and bend light, almost like water disturbed by an unseen hand, defying all known laws of physics. The ship was not simply sleek. It was haunting, almost predatory in its design. No markings, no insignia. Just a smooth, reflective surface that seemed to swallow the light around it. It glided silently, a phantom in the void, its presence both subtle and overwhelming. The alien representatives sat frozen, their collective gaze transfixed by the sight before them. None of them had ever seen anything like it, not in the legends of the ancient races, nor in the reports from their farthest-reaching scouts. It defied explanation, defied understanding. And yet there it was, undeniable, present, and silently asserting itself in the heart of the Galactic Union. Zerd, the Exevian consul, was the first to speak, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "This cannot be," he whispered. How? How can they?" The Zerkian representative, whose telepathic senses usually allowed them to pick up on even the slightest ripple in the fabric of reality, was now unnervingly quiet. They had never felt anything like this. It was as if the ship existed outside the realm of their perception, as though it was both there and not there at the same time. No readings could be taken, no analysis could be done. The ship existed beyond the reach of their most sophisticated technology. And then, with a sudden jolt, the ship's systems powered up. The quiet hum of its engines resonated in the minds of the council members, a low thrum that sent ripples through the very air. The once serene and haunting vessel now felt dangerous, its mere presence radiating power that none of the aliens could deny. Before the council could react, a voice broke through the silence once more. This time, it was not just an intrusion into their minds. It was a direct communication. The tone was calm, measured, and yet it carried an undeniable weight. "Galactic Council." The voice of Captain Ellis echoed. "I am Captain Ellis of the Terran Federation. This is your warning." The words were simple, yet they felt like a hammer falling on an anvil. The aliens could not ignore the threat now. The human ship was not just an anomaly. It was a declaration. It was power made manifest, a force that had arrived with no fanfare, no preparation, and yet had already proven itself far beyond anything the council had expected. "We have watched you," Captain Ellis continued, "for far too long. Your arrogance, your dismissive attitude toward us, it ends now. We are no longer the weak, insignificant species you once laughed at. We are humanity, and we have come to show you what we are capable of." The alien representatives exchanged looks of unease. The room, once filled with the sounds of their voices, was now thick with tension. They had never considered that humanity could pose any real threat to them, let alone something of this magnitude. Yet here they were, standing at the precipice of a new reality, one where the humans were no longer an afterthought. They were a force to be reckoned with. The ship remained motionless, its sleek form hovering in the vast emptiness of space. Its engines hummed with a power that resonated deep within the very core of the council's minds. And yet, it was the ship's silence that spoke the loudest. The aliens had been wrong. The humans had not only caught up, they had surpassed them. And now, with the full extent of their power revealed, there would be no more laughing, no more mockery. Humanity had declared its place in the galaxy. And the galaxy would soon feel the weight of that declaration. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, had long operated on its own terms. The great empires of the Union, Xerkians, Athic, Exevian, and countless others, had shaped the stars with their power, their technology, and their unfathomable mastery over the forces of nature. The universe had been divided into spheres of influence, each one governed by the established order of those who had ruled for millennia. No one had questioned it. No one had dared to challenge it. Until now. The Terran Federation's stealth ship hung in the silence of space, its smooth hull reflecting the distant stars, its engines silent but radiating an undercurrent of power that made the air itself feel heavy. Captain Ellis's voice continued to echo through the council chamber, its calm and measured tone cutting through the tension like a knife. "We are no longer the underdogs," Captain Ellis said, the words carrying the weight of history itself. "We are no longer your jokes. We are humanity. And we have come to claim our place in the galaxy." The aliens, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves facing a reality they had never anticipated. The words, simple yet undeniable, struck them like a thunderclap. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Union was forced to confront the truth. Humanity had arrived. The message was clear, and it was more than just a declaration of power. It was a warning, a call to arms. Humanity, though small in number compared to the vast empires that dominated the galaxy, had proven that they were capable of great things. They had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. Not now, not ever again. Zier, the Exevian consul, stood motionless in the center of the arena, his mind racing. His species had spent centuries in quiet contemplation, building empires of knowledge and peace, believing that intelligence and diplomacy would be their ultimate weapon. And now, that belief had been shattered by the humans, whose unpredictable nature had brought them to the very gates of the galaxy's power structures. The Xerkian, the ever-calm psychic, was silent, but the mental vibrations in the room were palpable. A sensation of discomfort, of disturbance, rippled through the council as the ship's message continued to reverberate across the stars. "We have studied you," Captain Ellis continued, "watched your every move. We know your weaknesses, your insecurities. You think you are untouchable, that your superiority makes you invulnerable. But you are wrong. Your complacency is your greatest flaw. The moment you underestimated us was the moment you sealed your fate." The voice was no longer just a message. It was a statement of intent. The aliens could feel it in their bones, a certainty that cut through the air like a blade. Humanity was no longer asking for recognition. They were demanding it. The message, though spoken in calm tones, had the effect of a seismic shockwave. It rippled through the consciousness of every being in the room, a stark reminder that the galaxy was not static. It was always in motion, always shifting, and humanity had just placed itself at the center of that shift. The Exevian consul's voice, once steady and assured, faltered for the first time. "But how?" Jair whispered, his mind grasping for an explanation, for some form of understanding that would allow him to maintain his sense of control over the situation. How could they? Captain Ellis did not respond directly. The silence from the ship was deafening, as though the humans were allowing the message to sink in fully, to fester in the minds of the council members. The ship's systems pulsed with a quiet but undeniable power, a reminder that this was not some empty threat. The ship was ready. The Terran Federation was ready. There would be no more questions, no more laughter. Humanity had arrived, and they would take their place among the stars whether the galaxy was ready or not. And the galaxy would have to decide how to respond. The council chamber remained dead silent, the weight of Captain Ellis's message hanging heavily in the air. The representatives of the Galactic Union, once filled with smug confidence, now looked around uneasily. Their collective power had always been enough to keep the universe in balance, to maintain their dominance over the stars. But the emergence of humanity, this small, insignificant species they had long ridiculed, had disrupted that illusion. No one had expected it, no one had believed it possible, and now that it was staring them in the face, they were forced to confront the reality that they were no longer the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. Zier, the Exevian consul, stood at the forefront, his once calm demeanor shattered. He had spent centuries studying the rise and fall of civilizations, witnessing the birth of empires and their inevitable decay. The Exevian people had always prided themselves on their ability to predict the course of history, to shape the future with their intellect and foresight. But humanity was an enigma, a species whose unpredictability had become its greatest weapon. No strategy, no calculation could account for the human factor. How could they have done this? Zier muttered, more to himself than to anyone else in the room. This technology, it's impossible. No race in the galaxy could develop such a ship in such a short span of time. And yet, the Zerkian representative, a tall, slender being with shimmering skin, had been the most vocal in their dismissal of humanity. But now, their silence was telling. The once imposing figure now appeared uncertain, their mind unable to penetrate the mystery of the human ship that hovered silently outside the council chamber. "I have no explanation," the Zerkian finally admitted, his voice low, tinged with disbelief. "None of our scans can detect anything. It is as if the ship exists outside of the known universe. It is not in our systems, not in our records. It is beyond us." The Athic representative, known for their calculating mind and strategic genius, was also unusually quiet. They had always prided themselves on their ability to predict the moves of any adversary, to outthink and outmaneuver. But this was different. Humanity had somehow bypassed all of their assumptions, all of their expectations, and had struck at the very heart of the Galactic Union's arrogance. "This is not just a ship," the Athic said, their voice a soft whisper, barely audible in the charged atmosphere. "This is a symbol, a message. Humanity is declaring war on our complacency, on our belief that we are untouchable." Zier took a step forward, his voice steady, though a trace of fear flickered in his eyes. "We cannot ignore them, not anymore. This ship is not just a weapon. It is a challenge. Humanity is forcing us to acknowledge their presence in this galaxy. They want us to see them, to hear them." For the first time in the history of the Galactic Union, the Council was at a crossroads. They had long been accustomed to maintaining peace through sheer dominance, to quashing any uprising before it could grow into a threat. But humanity was different. They had bypassed the traditional methods of war and diplomacy, relying on innovation and their own unyielding willpower. And now, the galaxy would have to decide how to respond. The council members began to murmur among themselves, their voices rising in a chaotic buzz as they debated what to do. The once unified and confident front had begun to fracture, uncertainty creeping into their discussions. What would be the cost of ignoring humanity? What would be the cost of confronting them head-on? As the murmurs grew louder, a new voice entered the chamber. It was not one of the council members, but an outsider, a figure that had been standing silently in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to make their presence known. The being stepped forward, a tall, shadowy figure clad in dark robes. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, their presence both menacing and enigmatic. "I have been observing the humans," the figure spoke, their voice deep and resonant, like thunder rolling across the stars. "And I suggest you do not underestimate them. They are not like any species we have encountered before." The council fell silent once again, the weight of the figure's words sinking into their collective consciousness. The mysterious being's warning was not just a piece of advice, it was a threat. A reminder that humanity's rise was not a simple anomaly, but part of a larger, more dangerous force that the galaxy was not prepared to face. "Humanity is more than you realize," the figure continued, their eyes glinting with an unsettling certainty. And if you do not act quickly, you may find yourselves facing an adversary unlike any other." The room grew cold as the council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had long prided themselves on their wisdom and power, but now, for the first time, they were faced with the terrifying reality that the galaxy was no longer theirs to command. Humanity had begun its rise, and the galaxy had no idea how far it would go. The tension in the council chamber was palpable, a heavy silence hanging in the air as the last words of the shadowy figure echoed through the minds of the representatives. The alien council, once so confident in their dominance, now found themselves faced with an undeniable truth. Humanity was not only capable of challenging their authority, but had already begun to reshape the galaxy in ways they had never imagined. The mysterious figure, cloaked in darkness, had stepped back into the shadows, leaving behind only the weight of their words. The council was left in disarray, their once unified front fractured by the sudden realization that humanity had become a force to be reckoned with. There was no longer any question of whether the Terran Federation was a threat. The question now was how the galaxy would respond to the unexpected rise of this new power. Zier, the Exevian consul, was the first to break the silence. His voice, usually steady and composed, trembled with uncertainty. "We cannot continue as if nothing has changed. Humanity has proven that they are no longer to be dismissed. They have shown us the extent of their power, and now they will expect us to react." The Zerkian representative nodded solemnly, their mind working furiously to calculate the possible outcomes. "They are unpredictable. That much is clear. We can no longer rely on our traditional methods of diplomacy. We cannot simply ignore them or contain them with force. This is unlike anything we've faced before." The Athik, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, their voice cutting through the growing anxiety in the room. "The time for complacency has passed. We must act before humanity becomes an unstoppable force. But what do we do? How do we strike at a species that has already proven itself capable of defying our expectations?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the council as the realization began to sink in. Humanity's stealth ship was not just a show of power. It was a harbinger, a sign that humanity was prepared to fight for their place in the stars, no matter the cost. "I have spent centuries studying the rise and fall of civilizations," Zier said, his voice steadying as he regained some semblance of composure. "And I can tell you this, underestimating humanity again would be a grave mistake. They will not bend to our will. They will not cower before us. They will fight for their survival, and they will do so with every ounce of their being." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was not a species to be dismissed. The galaxy had always been a place of balance, where the strong ruled and the weak were kept in check. But humanity was different. They had a fire in them that no one could predict, and that fire was now spreading across the stars. The Zerkian representative, who had long believed in the superiority of their own species, now spoke with a newfound respect for the Terran Federation. "Perhaps it is time to reconsider our position. Perhaps it is time to offer humanity a choice. Join us, or face the consequences of their defiance." A quiet murmur of agreement passed through the council, but there was still hesitation in the air. It was one thing to acknowledge humanity's potential, but another to admit that they might be a force worthy of alliance or confrontation. "Make no mistake," the shadowy figure's voice echoed again in the minds of the council. "The humans will not be swayed by mere words. They will not be cowed by promises of power. If you wish to engage them, you must understand this. They are not like any species you have faced before. They are adaptable, driven by a singular, unshakable resolve. And they will fight, with everything they have, to claim their place." As the figure's words faded into the silence, the council sat in stunned contemplation. The decision was no longer whether or not humanity was a threat. It was whether the galaxy could afford to ignore them any longer. Humanity had revealed its hand, and the galaxy was left with one undeniable truth. The balance of power was shifting. The Terran Federation, once a small and insignificant species on the fringes of the galaxy, had become a force that could no longer be ignored. They had declared their presence, their power, and their resolve. And now, the rest of the galaxy would have to decide whether to accept humanity's place among the stars, or face the consequences of standing in their way. The future of the galaxy, once shaped by the whims of ancient empires, was now in the hands of a new power. The tide had shifted, and it was humanity that would determine its course.